And yeah, we've got these military grade Gen 3 goggles that magnify the light about 50,000 times. And we take people out, we put the goggles in their hands, and then we point out stuff with lasers. And it's a crapshoot. You get different things on different nights, but you definitely can see things moving around up there. And the assist with the goggles is just, it's phenomenal. The whole sky lights up.
Wow. And this is done in the San Francisco Bay Area you're doing?
Yeah, so I actually am in Benicia, which is in the East Bay Area, and it's kind of cool. In my town here, we have this hill that you can walk to the top of, and it's kind of flattened out, and there's a huge labyrinth. Have you ever walked a labyrinth?
No.
Okay, so do you know what they are, though? They're like the little meditative walking mazes.
No, I've never been in. No.
Oh, okay. So a labyrinth is a big walking maze, and the idea is that it's so twisty that you almost can't kind of tell where it begins and where it ends. You just have to walk through it until the path is over. And it's known to be kind of a metaphor for life. And so there's this very spiritual practice of walking the labyrinth. So they often create a very sacred space. So we have this huge one on top of the hill, just right here in Benicia. And what we do is we take advantage of that as a little spiritual vortex. We take our chairs, we put it right in the middle of this huge labyrinth. And sometimes we place little crystal offerings in the middle. People like to do that. And we use that energy. And then it's just also so wonderful because we're up high, we have horizon to horizon. And that's really helpful because if something is a satellite, it might be going right from horizon to horizon, and we can rule it out. And if we don't see it going from horizon to horizon, there's usually a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's something anomalous. That's the type of things we're looking for. So it's a great viewing spot. And I'm really happy to have it so close to somewhere I live.
Yeah. And you do this like every night? You do other stuff, like you do courses, you teach courses and do stuff like that? So
yes.
What's your schedule like in terms of doing this kind of weird stuff?
I know. What's my schedule, right? So yeah. I do night watches 3 or 4 nights a week, up to that. Sometimes when it's a little bit colder, the weather is bad, it doesn't end up being quite that much. I usually teach psychic development courses 1 to 2 nights a week. Right now I have 2 courses going on. One is a class for empaths, who are people who are psychically sensitive to energies, and so they might take on energies around them. And so like right now we're focusing on, protection and grounding, the kinds of things that people have to do every day to maintain their psychic hygiene. The next one we're doing coming up here is a big clearing ceremony where we get the big meditation pyramid. We do the sage, the smoke, the drums, everything, and it's meant for like complete purging of other people's stuff that you don't need. It was information. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm done with it. So thank you. Take it back. So empaths have a hard time letting go of other people's energy. So we set the space for that. And then on the 3rd class, we switched the framework to empaths being cursed and instead think about it as a gift. And we use that empath ability to assist us in things like cold readings and doing psychic practices. And then I have another course I'm doing right now that is psychic development. So we spend 1 week on hearing, 1 on seeing, 1 on feeling, and 1 on just getting downloads. And I have a number of different things like psychometry and very light remote viewing and like all these different things that we can touch base into and out of, just to give people an experience that is either visual, audible, with feeling or just thought processes. So yeah, and then I'm kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to psychic development, because I think that it's actually not really important what tool you have in front of you or what method you use, because the real magic and what you really have to break through is this to this. Like you have to get this part all well working, and then the process that you use to trigger those ideas is less important. So I'd like to give people a slew of different options for ways to connect so that they can just find the one that works best and then focus on this part, which is actually more important. So yeah, I've got a lot of retreats and classes that have all sorts of different kinds of exercises.
Yeah, I'm actually doing an article on that we call the contact modality. So can you sort of make a list for that maybe you'll give me 1 or 2 that I haven't thought about. So ways to make contact. So you mentioned a few of them there.
Yeah, well, first of all, we have discussed a little bit about automatic writing. Automatic writing is amazing. And actually, when I was just at the Stargate to the Cosmos conference, that was my workshop. We did automatic writing.
Oh, is that right?
So Oh, yes, it's an amazing process. And what I'll tell people right now, which is a really good thing, whether you're going to do it clairaudiently, which is just kind of listening, or you're going to write it down or even speak it, into your phone or something like that. One of the ways to really prime the pump for communication type of contact is to start simple. Okay. I'll use the audible process first. Okay. For example, I'll say, just don't overcomplicate it. Think one word in your mind, just one word. Okay. Just get like one word. And then take a moment and go back to that word and add a couple of words before it or behind it. Maybe one word before and behind it, and make it like a little tiny mini phrase, right? So expand it out. And then add a few more words to make it maybe like a little bit of a phrase, and then make it a sentence. And then, is there another sentence that belongs with that sentence, right? So it's just like when you do regression, or when you do a visualization exercise in meditation, and you look down at the feet, and then you look at the knees, and then you look at the waist, and you fill it in consciously as you go to make the bigger picture, instead of just getting low-hanging fruit and being like, I don't know, I don't see anything. You can actually prime the pump a little bit. So clairaudiently, with a conversational method for contact, that can work very well. And then automatic writing, if you're just dipping into it, you can write a question and then just don't stop your pen. Just don't stop your pen. Don't ever stop your pen. They say neuroscience says you think 60 thoughts per minute in the beta state. 60. So all you have to do is write one, just one of them, just the loudest one. Just write that. Just write it. And then the other part is you have to suspend disbelief. You have to just say, okay, I'm just going to not be concerned whether this is real or not. I'm just going to have the experience. I have my whole life to judge it later. And only when you do that can you actually get the fullest out of the experience. So yeah, we did this automatic writing process, and we did a visualization process to see the being that we were talking to. And it's all quite easier than people expect it to be. And as a matter of fact, every time I teach this process, I have people coming up to me afterwards like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got something. And it's like, it's because we took it little piece at a time, just a little piece at a time. You weren't trying to overwhelm yourself with getting something big that didn't feel right. You just took little pieces at a time. And that's the trick, to get it as a primed pump and a well-oiled machine. And then you can just keep going from there.
So you may not need a near-death experience to get this going.
Nope. I don't think you do. I mean, I had one, and it assisted me to do what I'm doing now as far as teaching. But one of the things I love to do, all of my classes, all of my retreats, everything that I do in the psychic development realm is all to make it easy. Like I teach the shortcuts on how to do it so that you don't feel that it's overcomplicated. As a matter of fact, when I do my psychic development series, the first thing I do is a cold reading, which means no questions, no nothing.
Okay.
And I actually have everybody, and they're blown away at how psychic they are. I kind of call this, because it was taught to me, is called Akashic record readings, but it's not really important what you call it.
Yeah.
The point is, what you can do is, like, if you were, Grant, if you were to stand in front of somebody else and I was teaching this class, I would say, Grant, think of someone in your life and repeat their name like 10 times to the person across from you. Just repeat their name, just the vibration of their name. Just repeat it 10 times over and over. And then I have that other person, and I encourage them in a safe space to just riff. Tell me everything that comes to your mind. Don't worry about being right. We're not trying to get everything right. We're trying to get anything right. And when you set up that space, something profound comes through, and people are so blown away that they could come up with something. I mean, even one of my students, first time that she had done anything, I said a name and she said, my legs are shaking. And I told her afterwards, I said, that person I said has tremors in their legs. Like, how would she have known that? Never done any psychic anything at all. So you just kind of have to pretend like you can do it, and I'll be dang, you can do it. So I trick them into it at first, and then give them the proof, and then I go back to some of the logistics.
Amazing. And do you think, or where do you think it's coming from? Like, what are you tapping into? Is everything in a field and you're pulling it out of the field, or what's your interpretation of what's actually going on?
Well, there is a number of different places that people sort of naturally get their information from. For example, when I do my psychic development classes, it'll always happen that somebody will be a medium, and you can't stop a medium. They're going to go right to the people who passed over. Like that, it's like this natural connection that they already have. They try to get any information. That's where the pump is primed, and they go right there and get it from there. So I do believe that different people have different informational sources. For example, I can't go anywhere and get a reading without anybody not seeing my ET guides. Like, people are blown away sometimes because they are not used to seeing ET guides. And when they say, oh my gosh, I see this, and I'm like, yeah, it's an ET. So I think I'm very connected to that kind of energies, as are a lot of people who are contactees and whatnot. Then you get some people who are very, very connected to their ancestry, right? And all the information they get seems to have this feeling of coming from grandpas and grandmothers, and then other people get information from like a higher self source, which really feels like it's their vibration, just something in a more knowing kind of role. So I'd have to say, Grant, that I really think from doing years and years, almost 13 years now, of psychic development classes a couple times a week, and seeing my clients come in and out of these classes, I have to tell you, there is no one source. It really depends on the person, their path, what their predisposition to be comfortable with channeling. But I have never seen anybody that is absent of any kind of guidance.
Okay.
They're never absent of guidance. And I also see guidance evolve over time, depending on what they're working on or whatnot. So one person could come to me and work with like an angelic kind of energy and realm, and then 3 years later they go, okay, I had an ET experience, I have to come talk to you again. And I go, oh, you've been talking to them lately, because the information you're getting now is very specific, because the ETs, actually their dialogue is much different. It's much more straight and to the point, without filler words, right? Where some of the communication that comes from like the more human realm, like if someone did mediumship, there's all these like filler words and it sounds like we're talking. Whereas if you channel ETs, it's very direct, and it's very a lot of times just without the fluff or emotional words. It's more like a transmission. Does that make sense?
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, it can.
Yeah.
And of course, it depends on what kind of ET beings you're channeling. But in general, it's sound that they take on different characteristics, just like different languages take on a little bit of different characteristics. So, it varies by person and also over time, depending on what that person is working on in their life. But no one is absent of having a source of guidance.
Wow. So let's go to your book. Give me the name of your book, and when did you decide to write this book? And
so I decided to write it last month, and I wrote it in one night, in 13 and a half hours. It was completely channeled, and I didn't even start writing it until midnight. So it was a witching hour, and I had this information all outlined, but I never had the time to sit down and do it. And I actually wanted to get something on paper, because it's a little bit more technical than like, narrative. So I didn't have to worry about writing a good story with a good arc or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So it was actually very easy to just kind of write the facts of the research. So it was kind of outlined in a PowerPoint presentation that I had, and I really wanted to flesh it out and put it into a book format. And I scheduled these like retreats to go writing, and nothing, it just didn't happen. And then one night I get home, and I actually have a couple of days where I don't have any appointments. And I just get home, and it's midnight, and I'm like, I'm not tired. And I hear, open up your laptop, it's time now. And I'm like, it can't be time, it's midnight.
Wow.
It's like, open up your laptop, it's time now. And I'm like, all right, let me just see about it. So would you believe that I did the whole thing in my phone using talk to text, and then I emailed it to myself, and then wrote in and seamed it all up.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a complete transmission that was quick. And I mean, I took a couple of potty breaks and a couple of water breaks. And other than that, I was so intensely in that channeling download that I had to get it all out, and I couldn't sleep until I was done. And luckily, it wasn't, I mean, it's a modest book. It's just like 120 pages. So it's not like real big, but it does spell out some of the points that are current in my research now. And my research just comes from being a psychic reader who reads ET contactees. Right. And then I have my own story to kind of bounce some of my ideas off of. And then, you know, because I'm a reader and because I can channel, I also channel some information. So all of that I kind of compiled. The book is called Not Every Psychic is a Contactee, but Every Contactee is Psychic.
It's a good title.
And and it's called Psychic Skills in the ET Experiencer. So what I have found in my research is that, because again, I have researched for 13 years of doing psychic development for people who don't necessarily identify as an ET contactee, right?
Right.
And I have this other side of my work where if you know the secret handshake, you get an ET reading from me.
Yeah.
and it takes a whole other form. So what I found both in, you know, the subjects that I would read on with these people that had ET experiences and the nature of their experiences, I would also work with them with psychic development. And I found that there are things that are specific to ET contactees. For example, we talked about clairaudience. There's only like, I think I read some percentage somewhere that said, and it sounded pretty accurate to me, but it said 13% of people who cultivate their psychic abilities I identify with having like clairaudience or like a telepath, words, phrases, sentences as their go-to channel. But if I would almost actually argue that with ET contactees, it's closer to 80%. Now I'm still, before I give percentages, I'm still tallying everything up myself, but I'll tell you right now, it is night and day between the ET contactees. All of them, their major psychic channel is hearing. And so why is that? It's because we are having communication with another type of being that uses this method as their primary method of communicating, at least with us, right? So all these synapses are you know, forged in our brain, and maybe now we've been augmented to the point where this becomes low-hanging fruit. We can instantly get information through this access way. And so or is it some sort of predisposition? You know, there's that too. But I think that there is a cultivation within that. And then there are other things like the ability to lucid dream. When we know we're not alone, we have the same situation we have that people have when they lucid dream, which is, oh my gosh, I'm aware I'm dreaming, or I'm aware I'm in a situation. I'm aware I'm not alone. I'm aware I'm in control. I'm conscious, right? So there's just all these other implications of what makes ET contactees have a unique experience, even within this realm, as opposed to people without identifying with the ET contact experience. So this is just a book that correlates all the different things that make us unique. And then furthermore, actually goes into how to use this in everyday life to make it useful. And again, another important factor is how to use it to actually request ET contact or assist us in reaching out and obtaining ET contact, like through automatic writing, and not have to wait for our ET guides to, you know, tap us on the shoulder and give us a contact experience. And I do have a section in there about hybrid children and trying to actually induce like a situation where you can go visit your hybrid child. And so, yes,
you can do that.
You can't. Well, there's a level of competency that you would start at, and then there's a level of cultivation that you can do, and so it's kind of a sliding scale. So it's not that any one of these methods will produce these experiences, but all of these methods can produce these experiences. So it depends on the person, and there's a lot of factors, right? But I have not spoken to, I'll say many. I mean, there's only a few that I can think of parents of hybrid children that have come to me that have read about their ET contact experiences. Only a few have I had them not say, I want to see my children again. I want to hold this child. I want to see how my child is doing. I want to know how the child is that I remember gestating, right? So there's this topic is near and dear to my heart because I identify as a hybrid mother. So when these people would come to me, I would say, okay, how have I cultivated these these situations? What am I channeling about how to induce these situations? And what am I noticing other people doing that seems to be inducing these situations? So from those three perspectives, I add all of this content into the book. And one of the things that you can do to cultivate a kind of better chance at seeing these hybrid children, one of the things just right out of the bat I'll tell you is working with lucid dreaming. And to work with lucid dreaming, you have to immerse yourself in the subject. You have to watch videos, read books, you have to do all these things so that you're thinking lucidly when you dream, and then you can go and get your hybrid child and contact. You can actually induce these things to happen.
How often do you lucid dream? Are you able to do it at will, or like almost nightly?
Yeah, so I'm lucid every time I see a UFO in my dream. I'm seeing UFOs in my dreams at least once a week, even still. I've had times where it's been a lot more, like I said, and sometimes it's been like 3 or 4 nights a week. But the other thing too is I have always remembered all of my dreams ever since I was a child. I actually don't have many memories of my childhood. I have more memories of my childhood dreams.
Wow.
Because my dreams are very, very recallable. So I think that helps me a little bit, because I think people might be having lucid dreams and then they just don't remember in the morning, right? So, but for me, every time I would see a UFO, I would immediately become lucid. I will tell you that napping during the day assists you in being more lucid. And let me find the chapter here. If I could try to remember everything. There's a couple more good hints that I have in the book. One is when you open up your eyes in the morning, don't do it. Instead, wake up and keep your eyes closed for a long period of time. Another one is to set your alarm like 2 hours earlier than you would wake up and just put on low music instead of the alarm. So there's actually all sorts of things you can do. And lucid dreaming is something that is its own subject, unrelated to the ET phenomena, but it actually piggybacked with the ET phenomena becomes very, very conducive to integrating some of the memories and details of an ET contactee's contact scenarios. So I very highly recommend people, get into a position where they can kind of work with the energy of lucid dreaming, because you'll have access to so much more.
The alien channeler in Los Angeles, Bashar, said, we come to you in your dreams, because now you're in our world. Can you talk about that, the relationship between, do you think, like, people think it's a physical encounter with beings, and you're sort of implying, Bashar's sort of implying, it may not always be so physical as you think it is?
Yes. Okay, so I actually go into this. This is you're so psychic, Grant, because this is actually one of the other subjects of the book. We talk about the landscape of contact. Okay, so I won't go into great detail, but I'll mention now that there is, like, the beta state, which is the tip of the iceberg. It's what we're like conscious of, right? But then we're also downloading all this information into our subconscious via there's delta state, sleeping. Alpha state is like this relaxed state, and then theta is this like place in between relax and sleep, right? So there's this, and all of these different kind of awarenesses are plugging information into our subconscious. I mean, literally at the DNA level. So the beta state, where we're awake and everything is touching us and it's physical, if you'd actually believe and drew a picture of your subconscious, this beta state and what you're aware of would be only the tip of the iceberg. So I go into a little bit of detail about how that affects the landscapes that contact takes place. But what I'll actually do now is kind of ask you a question, Grant. Now, have you seen the movie Inception? Remember, with Leonardo DiCaprio? You haven't? Okay. So there's this movie where they are able to go into one person's dream and kind of download everybody into it, right? Okay. So whether we're talking about this artificial landscape, okay, let's use a different example. Let's use internet gaming. Okay. Internet gaming.
Okay.
Even though it's not real in a sense, are you still not connecting with other people?
Yes.
Right? Are the connections and the communications and possibly even the tasks at hand, are they not important, valid, real, actual connections, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say is that we tend to put more importance on these physical contacts, right? And it's not that they're not important, because they have very good reasons why they are important. But if we're trying to fit ET contact, multidimensional beings contact, okay, and we're trying to fit it into this box of, oh, it's real because it's physical and it's not real because it's not, then we're neglecting a complete landscape where connection can actually take place. Are we not in the internet age? Do we not understand that we can virtually, you and I, Grant, through Zoom, that we can actually have a tangible, meaningful connection where real things are in essence being happening the whole time, even though we're not in the same room or touching each other physically, right? Mm-hmm. So what I would say is that people have to get a little more familiar with all the different multidimensional levels, multi-frequency levels of existence and landscape, and then start thinking about these contact memories they have in relation to not just those two neat boxes of physical and not real, right? And instead add a few different, landscapes in there, and instead say, was the exchange real and valuable? Was the information real and valuable? And what was my takeaway? How profound did I feel about it, right? And all these other things, because it's not always going to fit in a box. I have a lot of people, and we all know this, when people are new to the subject, they come up to us and they say, oh yeah, I don't know, I've had a couple of dreams, right? So it's like, yeah, we could be just remembering in dreams and having some sort of recall that's coming up during dreams. Or is it that this delta state or this theta state of our awareness is in tune with an actual frequency plane that vibes with that state of consciousness? And so we're actually, by locating, we are non-local and bumping into non-locals, and we're having a legitimate connection and experience. And hopefully, if we can dissolve the barriers and the compartmentalizations beyond, of our actual conscious states, we can take that back with us when we wake up. So it's not so cut and dry. And so I really help people through this book just at least open up the doors of what they think the landscapes of contact can be, and start asking more questions about what happens during these contacts. What are you being told during these contacts? How do you feel during these contacts? And what kind of information do you remember, right? Instead of really being too concerned if it was physical or not physical. Physical doesn't equal just real, and non-physical doesn't equal not real.
Wow, you are one of the most insightful people I've ever come across. I mean, it seems like you've been thinking about this for 100 years. I mean, you give me all sorts of, and I think about this all the time, and you're giving me stuff that I've never thought about before.
Really, yeah.
You have the near-death experience, and then you have your first UFO. How does the UFO thing start? What kind of experience do you have? And I guess then go from there to, what do you think that, whatever the intelligence behind the phenomena is, what do you think they're doing?
Well, I'll go backwards. The intelligence behind the phenomena is so vast that can we even say without actually peeling apart every single layer of it, right? So then it becomes about, what are you getting out of it personally, and who's actually contacting you, and let's look at that agenda. I mean, that's why with, I have this Oracle deck that we made. This is Nisha and I's. It's an Oracle deck called the ET Experience or Oracle deck.
Wow.
And
composite
images. So it's just like a tarot deck or an oracle deck. And basically all these cards are meant to assist people in picking up the details about their contact scenarios. So there's lots of cards out there with things like blessings and manifestation. And I got sick and tired of using those, because I'm like, I need to see Zeta Reticuli. I need to see, abort a craft recently. And I need to see, you have a hybrid child. I need to see all these things, right? Which were things that were coming up during people's actual readings about their contact phenomena, right? Mm-hmm. How they relate to the contact phenomena. So I got sick of it, and I made a deck. And would you believe I made the deck in 2 weeks too?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I composited the images, did the book, everything. I had in 2 weeks, I had it in my hand. It's actually a funny story, but I've told it on other radio shows, so I'll spare you. But yeah, it's a complete download, because whether you consider it a download or a long time coming, it was just so clear what I had to do. And what I had to do is help people pick apart and place all of the details, give them a psychic perspective into it, assist them in seeing it with me, taking a look at all the information and then opening their mind as to the way they classified it. Like that is really what I long to do for people, because I believe that integrating all of the details from a subconscious state into the conscious state allows us to be more prepared for disclosure as a whole, and basically spiritual ascension as an individual. So I think it's all very, very worth looking at, even if it is hard at times to look at certain things because they may be uncomfortable. And I'm not trying to push anybody beyond their limits. Everyone has the ability to decide what's right for them. But the people who are drawn to my work are the ones who are ready to see. And I sure as heck was. I needed the answers. I wanted to know. I wanted to look at it. So that's what I dedicated my work to. But so that's the cards. But the UFO stuff started with, for me, like I said, right after my near-death experience, like within that same 6-month period, I started dreaming of UFOs like 3 or 4 nights a week. And I'll just make this the short version of the story. But I would see UFOs, and then I would be like, they're here for me, and I'd run and hide, and then I wouldn't remember anything after the dream. Like I wouldn't remember anything after that, which is strange because I remember all my dreams. So yeah. I always remember how they, beginning, middle, and end, all the way to the point where I'm waking up. I've always been able to remember that. So I'm remembering seeing these UFOs and then not remembering what happened after that. Now I'm still in dream time, right? Yeah. So I'll be talking to my ex-boyfriend from high school, or I'll be, playing in my old house that I grew up in, and then I'll see UFOs in my dream, right? So that's how it started. And then I started seeing UFOs and not being afraid anymore, because I was seeing them so much that literally my subconscious had built a callus. I was like, now I'm bored with it, right? So I start throwing rocks or doing, flashlights, and, I use those examples a lot, but, just kind of stuff like, well, what are you going to do? You just sitting there, Mm-hmm. So it was after that point where I had evolved, like within that year or so, that I actually had my first physical UFO sighting. So I'm on my way to Sedona, and I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm just kind of laying there, and I'm just like, okay, guys, I don't know if I'm ready for this or not, but let's just peel the Band-Aid off. Let's just do it. I just want to see you. Like I see you in my dreams. I think I'm ready. I don't know. I just, show me something. If you're here, show me something. What is this leading to? And the next night, I got a good night's rest that night. And the next night I went up into the Red Rocks with a little sacred tour. I was one of 3 people that was up in this little sacred tour. And I was the only one that saw a huge football field size craft. And it just no sound, wow. Just totally in between the Red Rocks and just in the distance, maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, at maybe, from the height that I was at, maybe 2 or 3 stories up. I mean, really close, like close. And it just buzzed by, like so incognito, but completely viewable by me. And I was the only one turning that way. And so I pinched myself, and I, remember this day, right in the phone. Yeah. It happened. Don't forget it, And that was my first one. And then it would end up being more and more that I would see with my physical eyes. And then it progressed in dream time to having contact. And it was all starting from the UFO sightings, and then kind of culminating into seeing beings in the room, hitting the ceiling, and actually that's when it got really interesting. And it was a whole nother level of experience, because then it was like, oh, my jacket's on the floor where I left it, and my half glass of water's still on the counter, and my person who's sleeping next to me is still sleeping next to me. And that's what they were wearing when they went to bed this night, so it reached a different level. So I've had both kind of these astral landscape contacts and the physical contacts. And it should be known and said that all of my contacts are pretty much, almost every single one of them was related to the hybrid program, meaning that I recall conception, gestation, and retrieval processes for, hybrid ET children. So that is pretty primarily what all of my contacts seem to be about when I would recall it from beginning, middle to end.
Grace? Are we talking Grace?
Mostly, yes. But a lot of times, Grant, that I would actually be interacting with some of these methods, I would be on the same craft. And even though grays were present, a lot of the actions, both medically and I'm not going to say muscle, I'm going to say chaperone wise. Muscle is a totally wrong word, but like the people who seem to manage the room,
Okay.
other than the people who do the medical procedures,
Yeah.
they all, after a time, started actually looking just like hybrids themselves, meaning that no one of them looked the same. So, but because I believe that I have agreed to the hybrid program. I remember the space, the Dreamtime astral contact, where I actually said yes. I remember, and it immediately
pre-birth. Was this pre-birth?
I do. One of the within the first year of my after my near-death experience, and I was having all these ET dreams, I had this experience where I was sitting across from someone who shared a likeness to someone I knew and cared about in my life, except they almost looked a little scaly. Okay. And I'm just dreaming. And this voice looks at me in the eye and says, please pay attention. Like to me, like basically calling my attention. And in that moment, I looked at this being across from me and I became completely lucid. It was like, oh, I was dreaming. I'm aware now. Yes. That was kind of my response. And this being said, I'm not who you think I am. And I said, it doesn't matter. And I knew in that moment that from that exchange, I had made my contract, because I was selflessly and compassionately agreeing to help a being, even if I didn't know exactly who it was. My heart felt connected, and I actually genuinely responded with a willingness to assist. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So for me in that moment, it was the next day that I had my first go on a UFO kind of dream situation, because it all started with dreams and then kind of ended up culminating into memories of being from my room, but I have never been with a bad taste in my mouth about the experiences. Mill labs are a little different. I identify as a mill lab because I've had a few experiences with that.
You had
too.
mill labs as well?
I have, yeah.
What do you think's going on with mill labs? Do you think that they're, at first, how do they pick up that you are having experiences?
Honestly, I jokingly say I've been hanging around Melinda Leslie too long.
Okay, yeah, Melinda.
One of the times I had an experience was in Sedona, and it was looking like an underground base, and it all adds up. But my friend Geraldine Orozco is doing some work because we had a shared mill lab when we were in Colorado over at the Watchtower, and she had derived a lot of information from that through regression. And for me, I don't kind of go on record saying that I understand all the agendas, because this is not my area of research. It's just some of the areas of my experience. But for me, one of my most memorable and my first mill lab was I had an abduction from the room, a physical abduction I had with ET gray beings, not like the hybrid kind of people, but with ET gray beings. I had a conception related situation happen. Okay. And then immediately upon that scenario ending, I found myself in a white room, guards at the door, medical guy, and then a guy in charge. Okay. With more of like the army stuff on. The other guy had more of a lab coat. And I say this a lot, and I don't mean to use a word that people might respond negatively to, but in my mind, first they shoot me up with something right here. And I'm thinking in my mind, gosh, is this memory wiper? Is this demobilizer to keep me from not moving? Or is this truth serum? And it's funny because I tell the girls that, and they're like, oh, you got the cocktail. It's all of it, actually. and I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. Because I was like, in my mind, I was trying to pick one, but I knew those things. I was thinking it in my mind. And unfortunately, during that contact, the other thing that was running through my mind was rape kit. And it's not that I had been raped or anything. Okay, I don't want to say that. Yeah. It's just that the medical procedure that happens, maybe when that takes place, is that was what was happening to me. So after that, I had another little bit where they were instructing me to do something else. But so it was half that medical procedure and half this scenario where they were like, who's good, who's bad, who's good, who's bad, who's good, who's bad, which I began to do a little bit of research in and a regression, and find out that that's one of their programs that they run all the time with a lot of mill labs, is that at some point they want to know from everybody they bring in, they want to know who's good, who's bad, who's good, who's bad, right?
In terms of the beings?
In terms of the beings, yes.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
and in my case, there was even some control over what they wanted me to believe who was good, who was bad.
Yeah,
So,
that's my next sort of question, because you're so insightful. I want you to go down the road of good and bad aliens, not so much the Millabs, but is there good aliens and bad aliens, and is there the wars in outer space, or are they just trying to get you to believe this?
No, there's so much that my experience taps into, but I've only been in the field for like not even very long. So my areas, I value research. So until I've done 10 years of research, I almost have a hard time even going on record saying anything. But from a psychic perspective and from an experiencer perspective, I can kind of answer where I'm at with it in my own mind. So, one thing I like to, this is my favorite way to answer this question, because we get asked this all the time, right? Are aliens good or bad, right? So I just actually, I taught a UFO course at a college recently.
Wow.
And they asked me back. So I got this question. Yeah, I got
Did you get a good reception? There's lots of kids there?
Yes, I got a great reception.
Wow.
And I actually did a good little 101 course. So we talked about ATIP, and we talked about the black budget, and we talked about, abductions. We talked all sorts of stuff.
Good for you.
And then,
Good for you.
yeah, and then the next night we did a UFO night watch, and so we had a lot of fun. But during this course, it just reminded me again that a lot of people are very concerned with, are they good or are they bad? And one of the things I like to do is to maybe not go on record saying who's good or who's bad, but kind of open people's mind up to a new way of thinking about it. So what I say is, okay, Grant, if there was a huge lion in the room, a huge lion, okay, would you want to go sleep in the cage with it tonight? And I would assume that you would be like, nah, no thanks, right? But is the lion evil, immoral, demonic, malicious? Are those programmings, are these understandings more for a human kind of program, right? Is the animal any of those things? And so I'm not saying that all ETs are animals, but I'm saying if you actually compare the totally different programs that some of these different ET beings are running, can we hold them to the same human standards? You know what I mean? So Grays, for example, okay, I just get this feeling from my run-ins with them that you don't want to sleep in the cage with them a lot. So you might run into situations that are not all that great. But at the end of the day, if you respect them as a lion, then you kind of understand that they may not be what we try to interpret them as being. Maybe they're just running a whole different program. And so,
well, would you consider your experience with them? Would you have considered parts of your experience with them bad or fearful? Or, I mean, are they just doing a job, whatever their job is?
Well, I have had experiences with them that are okay, because a lot of the things that I've gone through are medical, right? Mm-hmm. So I've had experiences where I've been in a lot of fear and I didn't feel that my body was being cared for very well. Okay, let's just say that. So I've had that, but then I get this sense, and I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna or anything, but I get this sense that that it's just it's like, gosh, if an animal went to the vet, they would be really, really freaked out, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's take the vet and just pretend that it's like this great person that's trying to help out. But then let's take the vet and say, okay, now they're just interested in the science, right? So now it's a little less than like clinical care, right? So there's all these different experiences that can be motivating these grays. And remember, there are different kinds of grays. And there are so many different kinds of hybrid programs, because a lot of them that I'm in, these hybrid programs, when I experience these conception, gestation, and retrieval experiences, in most cases, like 80% of my hybrid program gestations, retrievals, and conceptions, whatever, they're all at the least clinical. And I feel that I'm a value and an asset, and I'm treated as such. And in some cases, I actually feel connection, especially when the children are present, to a complete purpose that I would totally get behind. And then in other cases, there are the few where I feel like, this is not great a time that I'm having right now, right? But I tend to not actually assign a belief that they are malicious, just that they are completely different with different standards, understandings, priorities, interests, curiosities, processing methods. Apples and oranges sometimes.
Yeah. Various beings, like sometimes I've noticed, and you're insightful, so I'm going to ask you. A lot of times you'll never get anybody who seems to have just the one being. It's like the one being, and then suddenly there's hybrids, and then there's reptilians, and then there's mantid beings and stuff like that. And it's like almost like they're all working together. Have you got any impression upon that, even though you've only seemed to have had interactions with the Greys? Why suddenly these beings will all seem to appear at various times and with the same experiencer?
Yeah, so my friend Misha Johnson is actually an expert on the different races and the different places they come from and all this. So she actually has a lot more insight on this. I would just be able to draw from my experiences, which probably are not a testament to everyone's experiences. But I mean, we are very young. We are very young. What are we, like 40,000 years or something? We are really, really, really young. So just by standard odds, it's probably that everybody else has been around and acquainted with each other a lot longer. And if they are around and acquainted with each other a lot longer, I could see many, many reasons why different species would team up. I mean, even in our human collective, we have reasons why different governing bodies or different interest groups team up. So it's not that hard to imagine why. The other thing too is if there is a real interest in the hybrid process, I just think it wouldn't be thorough if it didn't assess everything in the gene pool. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So for me, the hybrid children that I've come across and the hybrid adults that I've come across that are on these crafts assisting with some of these processes, along with a certain kind of gray and a certain kind of tall white kind of gray guy, they are all different in a hodgepodge. So can I actually tell you that I know the reason for that? I can't, but I tell you it is happening. I have seen it happen. And based on all the other experiences that all my people have when I read them, they too have so-and-so with so-and-so, or these three kinds of beings were here and whatnot. I don't know why I'm feeling guided to say, though, sometimes the Palladium beings in my experiences have been by themselves. And I don't know why that is. Maybe they hold themselves to a specific standard that's aside from the hybrid program. And maybe because most of my experiences are the hybrid program, I've noticed their absence in them. That's possible. But these Nordic beings, I really don't see much trace of them personally in my experiences with the hybrid program type of contacts. And I don't know why I feel guided to say that, but yeah.
The hybrids, do you believe they're seeding another planet, or what do you think is going on?
Gosh, I mean, Geraldine Orozco said some amazing things recently that I put a lot of consideration to, that hybrids are being kind of implanted into these other timelines, into these other, kind of dimensional frequencies aside from our own current timeline. I found that very fascinating and very interesting, and she's looking more and more into that. When we had our shared mill lab, we had an experience where both of us were in a underground scenario, and we were having information, DNA kind of information, I don't know the technical terms, but taken from the spine. And that even in the mill lab programs, there was an attempt to create hybrids for possibly the same reason that she was picking up on the other hybrid programs, which is something to do with the timelines. So she's working into that, and I find that very fascinating. For me, I just don't know. Most of my experiences has been very emotional and heartfelt. And as far as the actual place that these children are going, the ones that I've met seem to still be aboard the crafts so I see them reoccurringly. So I don't know if they are on some other timeline. Maybe I'm going there to visit them in the first place. I don't know. But the beings that I have held and seen more than once seem to still be present on those crafts and not somewhere else. Does that make sense?
They've allowed you to be with your children, and so are they more human, more alien? And how you get more than one visit? Because that seems to be a little bit strange. Because you always hear the people complaining they saw the child one time, and where is it? Why can't I see it again?
Right, right. So two things. Number one, the only child I've seen twice is one child I've seen twice, once during gestation or retrieval,
Yeah.
and another time in sort of one of these, what do they call them? It's like a recreational, like daycare center kind of looking thing.
Oh,
What do
okay.
they call it? It's like, it's very sparse. It's not, there's no like really any toys or anything, but it's just this open space. Misha calls it something and I forget what she calls it, but it's just this area where they seem to have the children and they monitor them, and each child looks a little different. And so, the nursery, she calls it the nursery.
Okay.
So I have gone to the nursery and actually held one of the children twice. So, but I have also seen certain hybrid beings on multiple occasions that maybe are not mine, but that are part of delivering the procedures. So if they are hybrid beings and they're still on the craft, and I've seen one of my children twice, and I keep seeing children on the craft,
Yeah.
mine or not mine, then are they going somewhere? Maybe if they're aging out. A lot of people actually have experience with seeing, and I've had clients that do this, experience of seeing their children before they're going to die. And they've actually been told that the hybrid children are, at least a while back, like Misha is someone who's had this experience, and I've had other people in her age group share these experiences with me where they've like held their hybrid child for the last time because the hybrid child was going to die because they hadn't figured out how to sustain beyond puberty.
Yeah.
So I don't know yet because I'm not old enough. So if time is at all relative, my children may not be that old yet.
Wow.
So, and time seems to be somewhat relative because in my experiencers that I read, there seems to be a correlation between I see him once at this age, I see him a few years later at this age, and it seems to kind of make sense.
Yeah.
In like in alignment with our linear fashion. So there's something to that. And so I really don't know. Gosh, I wish I knew more of why they were being created, but I'll tell you right now, it just seems that every time I tap into this, like with channeling or intuitive, I get a different answer per person and different hybrid beings. So I think there are just so many hybrid programs out there. I think it's just a technology and a process that anybody with a certain level of consciousness and maturity has access to. And I think there's a lot of interest in hybrid programs for many different reasons. And I think the results and why it's happening and what happens after, I think they vary just as much, which is why it's hard for me to just say one flat reason.
Yeah.
It's just really so varied, which is why you have some people have experiences over here that are like traumatizing. And then you have me on the other end, which is like, hey, I've really enjoyed it. So they're both valid and right. It's just you're running in different crowds, maybe,
Yeah. Okay. Last question, then we'll go back to the book. You worked on sort of movie type stuff. Do you think they're embedding this stuff into movies? Do you think there's gradual sort of disclosure by somebody to get these ideas across in Hollywood?
Yes and no. So I think number one, sometimes from a filmmaker's perspective, okay? From a filmmaker's perspective, filmmakers a lot of times, I believe, are very inspired by the topics, and they genuinely have an idea or curiosity that they are in a very non-intrusive way. They're not trying to infiltrate, but they will explore the topic just because that's what their mind is curious about, and they'll just make a thing, okay?
Yeah.
However, are we being controlled as a mass, right? Is the information in the ethers that we have access to being manipulated in the first place?
Okay.
So Steven Spielberg, he's probably a big kid at heart, and he's got like all of these curiosities, and he's genuinely fascinated by the topic, and he's got a great imagination, which is one of the keys to tapping into psychic information. But does he also have the influence of the mass media mind control, right? Is he also, getting sprinkled with all of that as well? So I think that there's a sliding scale, because in some cases, we know, I mean, even just to debunk all the Project Blue Book, wasn't Disney like commissioned to do some of that, you know, even? So like, yes, it happens, but then there's also levels where people are just making things, because I know a lot of independent filmmakers who have made things and they're not trying to control anyone. They just literally are curious about the topic and they've made something.
They've done some research, yeah.
Yeah. So gosh, it's so hard to say, but from a filmmaker standpoint, I really want to see more movies, even if they're bad ideas. Yep. Let's look at them all, because I want this topic to not be taboo. So if certain Hollywood movies bring up stuff, gosh, I certainly hope they're not so infiltrated. But because like the movie Arrival, right? I thought that was inspiring. Did you see that movie?
That's that one I saw. Yeah.
That was inspiring. It was the thought that none of us had really considered before. And it was, you know, expansive for your mind. And so it would be a shame if something like that was taken advantage of, and it couldn't just be what it is, which is a meditation on an idea that could expand our mind with the subject. So I know there are good filmmakers that aren't trying to dupe anybody, but I know there are also bodies at work.
Yeah. You've been very inspiring. This is one of the better interviews I've ever had. Let's go through your book one more time, and then we'll shut it down. Describe your book, and what can people learn from it?
So the first one, I talk about my near-death experience, and then I start talking about the multidimensional nature of contact, getting back into the frequencies, and even just how we consciously connect to those frequencies and the different landscapes for contact. We talk about you know, have you ever heard of people that have a dream where their mother who's passed comes and visits them, right? So that would be kind of like the first level of interaction. Something would come into your dream space, right? And then there would be another interaction where maybe you pop into someone else's dream space, which is why I use the example of the movie Inception, right? So it doesn't matter whose landscape it is or who created it. What's the connection? What's taking place there? So we address that. We talk about lucid states and how that assists you in the process of breaking down the compartmentalizations of the different waves of consciousness, and how that implies the waves of consciousness and how they connect to the frequencies of these different landscapes. So we talk about, you know, it is not black and white. Okay. Yeah. We talk about the physiology and the role of the DNA, cultivation of psi abilities, and how to actually request ET contact to assist you with more cultivation of psi abilities. I use this term called UFO classroom, which is this phenomena that I experienced myself, and I've had multiple contactees. This comes up in their readings where they've had this experience where ETs are literally assisting them in cultivating ET or psychic, you know, abilities. And so there seems to be an interest in expanding our awareness on a psychic, you know, spectrum. So I talk about that and I address that. We talk about hybrid children, and then I go into great detail of the different channels of seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, not from the perspective of just what you're going to get on the internet, but from the perspective of you're an ET contactee. How does this apply differently to you? How do you use it in particular in the ways that are unique to you as an ET contactee? And then a step further, how do we use these specific processes to request and induce like your own ET contact? And I'm talking about like, you know, benevolent kind of contact, more of a spirit guide kind of contact of ET beings that are there to assist you in understanding things like the nature of reality, your role and your mission, and where the Earth is in its galactic timeline. So yeah, that's what the book is mostly about.
Wow. Show it one more time.
Okay.
And so that people can see the cover. And I've got to say in closing, Tana, this has been a stunning interview. It's like you've been talking about this. It's like you've been in this for 50 years. You have so much insight. I cannot believe it. And I hope that somebody brings you into conferences and you start to spell this out for people. I think you're right on the track. I've been working on the same sort of thing, and I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge that you've gotten, and the fact that it was inspired. And I will sort of add you to my book, Inspired. I have a whole chapter on inspired books, so I'll have to add yours to the list of books that other people have gotten. It's been an honor, absolute honor to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Grant.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Let me stop the tape here.